Hey there, Chiefs fans. Thank you for tuning in. We have a great show coming up today. We're going to talk a little Bob Sutton. We're going to talk some Patrick Mahomes. As always, we will have the latest headlines from Arrowhead. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe. If you don't like what you hear, drop a comment. Let me know. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Red and Gold Report. This first segment that I'm going to do to kick off this new season is something that I have wanted to put together for about 6 months, essentially since the end of last season. As soon as that crushing playoff loss to the Titans was over, I started to hear this storyline, this narrative kind of out there in the ether about Bob Sutton. I couldn't tell you how many times over the course of this summer and in the spring at different barbecues and birthdays, I heard friends and family and well-meaning Chiefs fans tell me that Bob Sutton is the problem. Bob Sutton's the reason for our struggles mid-season last season. He is the reason for our most recent playoff loss, and I don't buy it. I'm not buying into that storyline, that narrative, because I believe in Bob Sutton, and I think that the Chiefs are lucky to have Bob Sutton. And I've got a couple reasons why, and I'll explain both of those here in this segment. Firstly, the people who are criticizing the defense, specifically their performance last year, don't understand the scheme. Bob Sutton's defenses have traditionally been built around a scheme that emphasizes rushing the passer at an elite level. And when this defense has had healthy edge rushers, this defense has performed at an elite level, has consistently been in the top 10 in scoring, as well as several other categories. The problem is, for the last couple of years, the edge rushers haven't been healthy. So it's a health issue, specifically in regards to Bob Sutton's scheme, more so than it is a Bob Sutton issue. So, for instance, this past year, 2017, Justin Houston was healthy for the entire season. He played in 15 games. The only game that he set out was that meaningless game at the end of the year in Denver. Unfortunately, Dee Ford struggled with a back injury and only played in 6 games. Tamba Ali was on the declining end of his career and only played in 5 games. Edge rushers can't be effective if you only have one above average edge rusher, which was what happened last year with Justin Houston. They can be double teamed, they're easy to chip out of the backfield with a back, etc. The scheme doesn't work if you only have one healthy above average edge rusher. We did not have that this past year. Rewind another year to 2016. Again, you had a healthy Dee Ford. He played in 15 games, but you didn't have a solid complement for him. Justin Houston was hurt, only played in 5 games in 2016. Tamba Ali was healthy for the entire season, but he was on the declining end of his career, was no longer able to play at an elite level. So again, you have injuries that affect the scheme. You have to go back another year to 2015 to find the last time that this Kansas City Chiefs defense had a healthy edge rusher on both sides of the defense. 2015 was the last time the Bob Sutton scheme was able to be fully implemented. And if you look at the statistics for 2015, the Chiefs defense gave up an average of 17.9 points per game, which was good for the third best in the NFL. 329.3 yards per game was what they allowed, which is about 40 yards better than they've done each of these last 2 years in struggling with injuries. And their third down percentage, which is a huge statistic for defenses, was about 10% better than it was in each of the last 2 seasons. So again, injuries have sidelined the scheme. Losing an edge rusher is much more detrimental to Bob Sutton's scheme than it would be to other schemes, and that's only addressing the injuries to the pass rushers. I haven't even brought up the Eric Berry injury because he's not an edge rusher, but Eric Berry going out last year in week 1 was such a blow to this team, and it can't be understated. Eric Berry is the captain, the emotional leader, the heart and the soul of this defense. So when you look at the injuries and the impact that some of those injuries had on the scheme, it's easy to see that it's not Bob Sutton that has been the issue the last couple of years. It's been the injuries. When the edge rushers are healthy in this scheme, this defense plays at an elite level, which is why I'm not concerned about the cornerbacks. That's been another thing that people have talked about this offseason. A lot of the talking heads on the radio and on the television, etc., complain over and over again about their concerns with the cornerback position. But look at the history of Bob Sutton's defenses in his tenure here in Kansas City. He has proven over and over again that when his pass rush is effective and healthy, it can make up for below average cornerback play. That's why they refuse to pay at the cornerback position. Look at the above average cornerbacks that we've had since Bob Sutton came here. Brandon Flowers, for instance, they let him walk. Sean Smith, they let him walk. Marcus Peters, they traded him away because that is not their scheme. There's this thing in the NFL called the salary cap. It would be great if we could spend infinite amounts of money at every single position on the defense and essentially just have 11 Pro Bowlers out there. But it doesn't work in the NFL because of the salary cap. So you have to be selective about when and where you choose to spend big money. They spent $100 million on Justin Houston. They've spent high draft picks on their edge rushers. Dee Ford, first-round draft pick. Breeland Speaks in this past draft. In a draft when they didn't have very many draft picks to use, they spent their top draft pick on another edge rusher, even traded up to get him. So again, you have to look at the scheme before you try to criticize Bob Sutton for some of the struggles recently. I'm not buying it. And then the other big thing, and I'll touch on this just briefly. If you look across the NFL, there is currently no other defensive coordinator who has been tenured at that position for as long as Bob Sutton. Defensive coordinator is a position with tremendous turnover. A lot of the reason for this is because defensive coordinator is essentially your last springboard before you become a head coach. Defensive coordinators get tapped all the time to become head coaches. Now, I know offensive coordinators do as well. Everybody in Kansas City knows that. But the difference is most head coaches are involved in the play calling on the offensive side. So that offensive coordinator is sharing a lot of duties and sharing responsibilities. Defensive coordinators generally have free reign of the defense, which means that they are in a position that is much more closely aligned to the responsibilities of a head coach. The Chiefs have lost offensive coordinator after offensive coordinator. Matt Nagy last year, Doug Peterson a couple of years before that. And as long as Andy Reid is here, that is going to be a continuing storyline because Andy Reid is an offensive guru. Whether you like him or not, you have to admit, he is a great offensive coach. His offensive coordinators are going to be continuously tapped for head coaching jobs for as long as he is here. The last thing we need is for that to start happening on the other side of the ball as well. As long as Bob Sutton's here, you're not going to have that happen. And trust me, it happens. Of the 32 teams in the NFL, 22 of them have had their defensive coordinator for 1 year or less. 69%, basically 70% of the league has a defensive coordinator who has been in that position for 1 year or less. Again, we already have that coaching carousel going on the offensive side of the ball, and we will continue to have that for as long as Andy Reid is here. It would be detrimental to the Chiefs if they began facing year in and year out that same kind of turnover on the defensive side of the ball. So again, to recap my 2 points here. Bob Sutton's defense, when his scheme is intact, when they are healthy, he has proven that his defenses can perform at an elite level. I think they'll be back there this year. Tano Passanio was late to football, late to the position in the 3-4 defense. I expect a quantum leap in his development. They drafted Breeland Speaks. Dee Ford should be healthy finally, and obviously Justin Houston is Justin Houston. When his scheme is healthy, his defenses are elite. And secondly, Bob Sutton isn't looking for a head coaching job. Bob Sutton is content where he is in Kansas City, and I think because of the nature of Andy Reid's offense and the fact that his offensive coordinators are constantly interviewing and moving into head coaching jobs, I think it's going to be really important that we keep Bob Sutton and make sure that we don't start that coaching carousel on the other side of the ball as well. So, enough hate on Bob Sutton. I'm confident in him. And with a healthy edge rush, I think that our defense will be back to the elite levels that we have seen in 2015. That wraps up our first segment here today, and I believe we are ready for our first Arrowhead headline.
NFL.com reported over the weekend that the Chiefs may be one of several teams interested in former Redskins cornerback Bashaud Breeland. Breeland played 4 seasons with the Redskins, compiling 270 tackles, 60 passes defended, 8 interceptions, and 7 forced fumbles. The Chiefs are also rumored to have shown interest in former Steelers wide receiver Eli Rogers. This has been an Arrowhead headline. Now, back to the Red Gold Report.
And we're back here on the Red and Gold Report. This final segment is probably the segment that you came here to listen to. we're going to look at the odds, evaluate the odds of Patrick Mahomes potentially making it to the Pro Bowl. Patrick Mahomes has been the number one hot-button issue for Chiefs fans this offseason, and for obvious reasons. I'm going to take a look at a couple of things he has going for him, a couple of scenarios that are going to work in his favor this year that could, emphasis on the could, land him in a Pro Bowl. Now, before I even get into this segment, there are two caveats that I feel obligated to make. And the first caveat is that if I had to pick a hard line yes or no on whether or not I thought Patrick Mahomes would actually make it to the Pro Bowl, and if I was forced to bet my life savings on it, I would have to bet no. For obvious reasons. This will be his first year as a full-time starter. He's young, blah, blah, blah. You've heard those talking points from all of the naysayers all year. But, with that being said, if he makes it to the Pro Bowl, don't be surprised. And I'll get into that here in a minute. But the other caveat that I have to make is that I don't necessarily have the best track record in evaluating quarterbacks. And I'll tell you a little story to kind of demonstrate this point. I actually own a Brody Croyle jersey. And that's honestly probably all the story that you need to understand just how bad I have been in the past at evaluating quarterbacks. But I took it even one step further. I didn't just buy his jersey. I was convinced that Brody Croyle was our guy, that he was going to finally be that franchise quarterback for the Chiefs. And obviously he wasn't, because he was, if I remember correctly, he was 0-9 as a starter, never actually won an NFL game. So, that's the second caveat. With that being said, let's get into the segment here. Patrick Mahomes has three things going for him that, again, could land him in the Pro Bowl. If I had to pick yes or no, I'd go no just to be safe, to be conservative. But if he makes it to the Pro Bowl, don't be surprised. The first reason why that's a legitimate possibility is that Patrick Mahomes has world-class arm strength. Now, that statement sounds kind of asinine. It sounds kind of like a big so what, right? Every quarterback who makes it to this level is a phenomenal athlete. Tyler Bray was a phenomenal athlete. Aaron Murray was a great quarterback, right? You don't make it to the NFL if you're not. But when I say that Patrick Mahomes has world-class arm strength, I'm talking possibly top 5 all time in the history of the NFL. A good indicator of how you know that to be true, and not just fanboy hype, is picture this scenario. You're in a meeting with all of the talking heads from all of the major networks, Fox Sports, ESPN, Good Morning Football, whatever. And you sit down there and you throw that out at them. You say, I'm the average Joe in the room, but I really think that Patrick Mahomes might have the strongest, if not one of the top 5 strongest arms in the history of the NFL. They wouldn't laugh you out of the room. Their reaction would tell you everything. For example, Christian Hackenberg was supposed to be the big phenom, right? At one point, they thought that he was going to be a stud. If you had said at that time, at the peak of his hype, if you had said to that same group of people, I think Christian Hackenberg might have the strongest arm in the history of the NFL, you would get laughed out of the room. But if you said that about Patrick Mahomes, they might not agree with you, but they would seriously consider the argument. Patrick Mahomes has world-class arm strength. Number 2. The second thing he has going for him that might land him in the Pro Bowl is Andy Reid. Now, I know Andy Reid can be a polarizing figure. He does have this ridiculous talent, this ability to just rip the heart out of his fans every year in the playoffs. But whether you like him or not, Andy Reid is a great coach. If I remember correctly, I think it was last year that he entered into the top 10 all-time in wins, and I believe he has the possibility with a good season this year to jump another spot on that list. Andy Reid is an offensive guru, like we touched on in the previous segment. His offensive coordinators are constantly getting tapped for head coaching jobs because Andy Reid is an offensive guru. That's going to work wonders for a young quarterback. And then the other point, the final point on Andy Reid is his offense consists of high percentage pass routes, those underneath routes, those screens, those swings, those dump off pass plays. Those are going to work great for a young quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, because the easiest way to get yourself in trouble if you're a young quarterback is to start to try to force the ball, especially to try to force the ball downfield, make some of those throws that you might have made in college. Most young guys can't do that in the NFL their first year, and Andy Reid's offense emphasizes those shorter routes, those higher percentage routes. So, point number 2 is Andy Reid. Phenomenal coach. Patrick Mahomes has that going for him. And the final point, the final thing that Patrick Mahomes has going for him, number 3, is that he has a world-class arsenal. There was a media outlet, I don't even remember which outlet it was, but a week or two ago they released this story, and I'm sure you all saw it. They ranked the NFL's top arsenals. Essentially, the pieces, the complements that the quarterback had, his receivers, his running back, etc. And the Chiefs ranked number 1 on that list, and I'm not surprised, right? Look at their tight end, Travis Kelce. You could make a case that he is the best tight end in the league. Only other possible candidate is Gronkowski, but with some of the struggles that Gronk has had the last couple of years, you could make a case that Kelce is the best. But even if you're not going to say he's the best, he's number 2, no question. Kareem Hunt. Now, granted, Kareem Hunt only has 1 year in the league. It's a pretty small sample size, but he led all rushers last year, right? That's not an opinion. Statistically, he rushed for more yards than anybody else in the NFL. You have Tyreek Hill, who is an absolute freak. World-class speed, coming off of his first 1,000-yard receiving season in his second year. You have Sammy Watkins, who his production was down a little bit, but he was in an offense with so many weapons that it's not that surprising, and I really expect him, under the tutelage of Andy Reid, to get back on track. And then finally, Chris Conley. Let's take a minute to talk about Chris Conley. Chris Conley was on pace to have a breakout year last year. He was on pace to have over 500 yards receiving. Now, 500 yards receiving isn't great, but if you're the number 3 receiver on the depth chart, that is great. And Chris Conley is going to be the number 3 receiver on the receiving depth chart, but if we're talking actual pass catchers, factoring in tight ends and running backs, Chris Conley may very well be the number 5 receiving option. If you look at the top 5 passing offenses from last year, New England, San Diego, Detroit, New Orleans, Pittsburgh. Of those 5, only 2 of them got 500 yards or more out of their number 4 option. That was San Diego, and that was Pittsburgh. You know how many of them got 500 yards out of their number 5 receiving option? None of them. The Chiefs have the potential next year to have a number 5 option. Number 3 receiver, but number 5 receiving option with 500 yards or more. Now, I know Chris Conley didn't have 500 yards last year, and I know that with the more options you have, you can expect a decrease in actual catches, but he has a skill set with that potential there. Talk about an absolute embarrassment of riches. So again, to wrap up the segment here, if someone put a gun to my head and I had to bet a whole bunch of money on a hard line, yes or no, whether or not I thought Patrick Mahomes would make the Pro Bowl, I would have to go with the no. But I'm going to tell you right now, if he makes it to the Pro Bowl, don't be surprised. And if he makes it to the Pro Bowl, these 3 things here that I have listed will be key reasons why. That's it for this segment. I believe we have one final Arrowhead headline. The Chiefs' top draft pick, Breeland Speaks, met with the media this week to kick off training camp. Speaks indicated that he is facing a learning curve when it comes to pass coverage, but stated that veteran members of the team have taken him under their wing. Speaks also stated that his approach to learning a new system is to take everything one drill at a time. The Chiefs are hoping that Speaks can help them to bolster a pass rushing unit that has struggled in recent seasons. This has been an Arrowhead headline. Now, back to the Red and Gold Report. And that's our show for today. 2 quick segments that flew by for me and hopefully for you as well. It is great to have football back. It's great to have you with us here. If you're still listening, hopefully that means that you've enjoyed what you heard. It could also mean that you just don't have a lot going on in your life. And I suppose it could also mean that you may have very well died in the middle of the show and could be slumped over your keyboard right now. Hopefully that's not the case, and hopefully the first option is the truth. And if you did indeed enjoy what you heard today, then like I said at the top of the show, subscribe, drop a comment, let us know. Thank you for tuning in. This has been the Red and Gold Report. God bless, and go Chiefs.